Okay, with this one, we are going to ask people to kindly donate to my Patreon. That's patreon.com/challenge history. I've gone over some of the other stuff of a couple of different things that we're going to be doing once we get enough people. That's for the top level. It's a Byzantine gold coin. Once we get enough people, we'll give away of that, and a Roman silver coin for once we get enough people on that. That's for $100 for the Byzantine gold coin for a month, and 50 a month for the giveaway of the Roman silver coin. Obviously, because the price with it, we have to make sure that there's enough money coming in to both sustain my channel and to make sure that there's enough money coming with that. Now, let's go with this thing with it. Let's look at the actual numbers with it. Other numbers that I've been given recently with it, there's about, I'd like to break it down by age because I think age is the most important. And when we look at age, it goes down to these three different groups. Number one is when we view this, we should be viewing 18 to 29. The second group should be 29 to 65 and 65 plus for the third group. Now, people we usually want to grade these demographics in this by race with it, and I think that's you can't really because those can actually fluctuate, and when those fluctuate, that's a massive problem in grading what we actually have for what ends up coming about with the uh, outcome of your of the actual these poll numbers and how they come about, because right now these are just approval numbers. It's hard to really, I don't like gauging this at this point with it because hasn't actually been an actual debate, so it's hard to actually gauge an actual uh, gauge between him and Biden with it. Biden would currently be in the lead with that. So, but it's hard to really gauge where we sit at with that, but we can gauge off him for presidential approval to see where we're at. Now, I'll go with the lowest voting group. This is the one where he has by percentage. This is where he has an advantage over. This is about 54% of approval, and this would be the 29 to 65 group. Now, the problem with this is even though this is a pretty good approval, the in which you would have obviously probably somewhere around a 3% error in either one of these groups, then go in either direction. Uh, the problem being with this is when we're talking about it is you can actually have uh, a you can actually have the error of it be uh, of this thing of these groups with it. Obviously, so which means we can go up to about 57 as low as about 51. So it's still going to be a positive. Now, when we talk about what it means in this middle group does not vote at very high numbers. Now that means that when they actually go out to vote, that they're not going to necessarily vote in enough high numbers to get someone elected. And that means that if this is why I don't like to look at racial demographics, because you need to know where they actually align, because you could be gaining support in a specific race, like he could be gaining support in black vote, because he was gaining support in black vote in the around the midterms last time. But when we actually looked at the percentage of black vote that actually showed up, well, it just turned out that he didn't gain much more than what Romney did when it came out to the actual output. Now, the reason why is because he was all the people he was gaining were in this very, very low vote turnout group of the 29 to 65. Now, if you gain in that group only, then you're not going to have a very high turnout. There's a very, very those are very, very low numbers. You don't want people in those groups. And if people if your opponent controls the other group around that means that's what ends up happening. So in the midterms, we found that basically he was showing up support like that. The candidates that he was backing with it were not winning because the fact is the other side still had all of the support in these key other groups, which is 18 to 29 and 65 plus. And when we start to look at his 18 to 29, we find that he's only sitting at 50%. Now, this is just breaking even. Now, it could be as high as a little bit of a plus with it, but it could also be in the negative. And this is something that needs to be understood: is that if he's in the if he's around this breaking even, that means this one key voter group is not going to be an advantage for him. And they usually vote. They usually are a pretty good voting block. Uh, not obviously not the best voting block, but they are better than that 29 to 65 voting block. I'll get to the best voting block in a minute, but they're usually a pretty good voting block because they're usually a little more enthusiastic about voting, and then and they usually don't have as many things in their way that'll keep them from voting. As many personal responsibilities that usually keep them from voting, so voting can be put onto their schedule a lot easier. Then when it comes down to the last group, we have 65 plus. Now this is where he's sitting in a lot of trouble. This is only sitting at 45%. Even with a margin of error, that only puts him at 48%. This means he's still, and this is the largest, this is percentage-wise the largest voting block. And they vote in the largest percentages. This means that he's likely to basically get killed here. Now, traditionally with it is what ended up giving him the election in 2016 was specifically this voting block actually helped him out. And they were actually in a positive for him. Now, this time around with it is they're actually in a very big negative. This means these people are none too happy with him. He angered them in a big way. This means of what he's done with it, they've actually gotten pissed off at him and what they've actually seen with what he's done. So he's actually angered these older voters, or voters that have actually basically entered in from the 29 to 65 group that have actually gone in weren't happy with him to begin with. So you've actually added some more voters that way. And with this additional group, we now see that this large group now is, which votes in high numbers, is basically which right now we're talking a 5% reduction in what he would actually initially expect to be at. That's a major problem. When we see that he's at a -5 from what would be in percentages from what would be breaking even, that shows that he's actually in a lot of trouble. Because this is one major demographic you need. If he's talking -5 there, and we're talking 50% at the second biggest demographic, that's not in good shape. I've seen other people trying to tout, oh, he's up to 52% approval, which is his highest yet. Well, that's mostly through a group that's going to be voting the lowest in the lowest turnout group, and you cannot rely upon those people. 29 to 65 is a very, very poor turnout group. And with that, you can't rely upon them. And what these reports usually try to do is they try to make Trump look good, is they try to bolster up his thing by race. They try to do that which is not a reliable point when we're talking presidential support when it comes on to the election. they try to say, oh, his black support's up, his Hispanic support. Well, Hispanic support really usually stays at a certain amount when it comes down to a president. And a president, if they're in the 30s from a Republican for Hispanic support, that's not very good, especially on the GOP side. You really need a higher than that amount with it, because you really want to, when it comes down to the Hispanic support, you really want to split that number with the Democrats. If the Democrats have an advantage on that, that means you really don't, you really are not doing a very good job. Black support, I mean, it's showing at the 30s in percentages, but now it becomes on where's that group? Is that group in a age demographic in which it would be positive, in which they're actually going to turn out, or is it not? When we were talking about the midterms, that actual age demographic is something that was not looking very, very good. And this is something in which people that are voting for Trump need to understand that. I've seen people voting for Trump to say, "Oh, but his poll numbers in 2016 weren't that good." Well, his poll numbers, when you actually broke them down, the actual end poll numbers, the exit numbers, were actually shown as being a lot better. We actually shown that they're making massive mistakes when they're actually doing polling, and these people had actually admitted they were doing mistakes, and it was. And this is what was happening when we saw that there were of what was really occurring out there. It was a complete different story. There was pretty much a split in the actual outcome. And the only thing is Hillary Clinton got a little bit of a bump for actually being the party that was in there already. Now we're seeing that Trump is actually getting this bump, and he is considered still to be down by Biden. Now this should be very, very troubling. And there's some reasons behind this as well. Because when we look at the actual promises, some of the promises that he made, he hasn't kept up to them. He stated he was going to get out of the UN. We're still in the UN, and that hasn't changed one bit. Even if our funding is slightly reduced in the UN funding with it, that has not changed. He said we're going to get out of NATO. Not only are we still in NATO, our forces are still just the same. I mean, we may have made a slight reduction in a couple of countries with it, but we're still 100% in NATO. Nothing has changed. Our financial output in NATO is still exactly the same. I mean, the only thing he's done is asked other countries to pay more, which does not financially suit us at all. And that was about the silliest damn thing we could actually do. People didn't want that. People wanted NATO to be dissolved so Europe could actually defend themselves. Now, when we look at some of the other things, he promised to do a full audit of the Federal Reserve. Not only did he not do that, he actually kept up the Obama system of basically trying to keep rates low so it would benefit him. We can see him plenty of speeches out there saying, I want to basically get all the advantages of these low interest rates so it pumps up the stock market, instead of actually getting the rates normalized so that the economy can actually get to where people are actually having an incentive to save, instead of just pumping up the balloon, the bubble, I should say, of the stock market. Now, these are things that have actually really hurt him. It's actually done a lot of damage to Main Street because of what he's done. He's also stated that he was going to get out of wars. Well, he has not done one war that he's exited out of. He maybe sent home a couple hundred people, but these are every time that he's brought up the idea, he's reverted, and when a neocon starts screaming about it, he's basically has done things where he stated that we were supposed to get a better Iran nuclear deal. There's not only not that, but he's pretty much pushed us near the brink of war with Iran. And that's not what anybody wanted. except these neoconservatives, and they're considered to be kind of like outliers in the party. So when it comes down to it, is he's pretty much has backed out of so many different uh, promises that he's made. I mean, he's made certain things with it, and then when it comes down to immigration, look at this. He's done nothing for illegal immigration, but he's actually halted legal immigration, uh, citing a pointless thing of the coronavirus. This is something that nobody wanted except these protectionists. I mean, these are things that anger people. There are many, many people that actually that this actually negatively affects, and yet he thinks he's doing things for America. He's done tariffs on China. Nobody asked for tariffs on China because it just rises the price of their own goods that they're buying in the store. Not everybody can afford a lot of these American made goods because there's a lot of inflation on our goods. Mind you, that because of the Federal Reserve, we actually have lost 97% of our purchase power, which means our prices are inflating every day, which means to buy an American made good, it costs an insane amount of money. Now, when you're talking about that with it compared to a Chinese made good or Chinese parts with an American assembled good, you can actually save a lot of money. And there's a lot of American companies that depend on these. And he's actually hurting American companies by doing this. And this is something in which has caused a closure of a lot of American companies. Well before the coronavirus, we were seeing closures of brick and mortar companies all around the U.S. And this is directly linked to his practices of tariffs. And it caused the damage of many a company. And because he did this, and it caused so much damage that we can't recover. And when people are saying, "Oh, we're going to have this massive recovery," and blah 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 blah, and all this other garbage, it's not true. And we're just leaning into this crash right now, because what's going to happen is it's going to be worse than the 2008 crash, because of it's just going to be it was a huge inflated bubble. And that's all he did was this inflate a bubble worse than what he got from Obama. And this bubble's been inflating since Bush. You had Bush that inflated it. Obama inflated it even more. Bush started the inflation at the end of his term. Obama inflated it a lot more. Then he's continued to inflate it. And now when it's going to explode, now this is not the housing bubble like was under Bush to Obama with it. This is what this is essentially is this is basically a bond bubble, basically meaning both private and public debt that essentially is paid all at once with a essentially a bulk loan, where you basically you ask for the money and they pay it, and you pay it back all at once with interest. Now, essentially, what's going to happen is there's a lot of toxic loans out. The Federal Reserve has bought up a lot of this. Well, the fact is and what happened was that when there was a lot of capital open, there was a lot of stock buybacks to pump up the stock market because of this, to make the stock market look better. Well, the fact is when the stock market tended to shrink a little bit, they started to do more of these bond buybacks. Well, the fact is, eventually, we're going to find to where there's going to be a huge blow up, because it didn't buy back all of the bonds in the private world. There's still a bunch of bonds out there. They're going to have massive implications on many of these companies. And then we also have extra amounts of public bonds that are now out there, and we don't have the uh, investors into these because no one wants to invest into government bonds because there's no uh, percentage paid on them because the government can't afford to pay them because of our actual amount of debt, because our actual amount of debt is astronomical. And when people say, oh, but Trump is going to win because of his percentages, well, the fact is he's not going to, because the fact is the percentages in these areas don't look good. When we look at people that are actually in the retirement age groups, they're not happy with him because the fact is when they rely on, a lot of them rely on just basic savings and they can't get anything in savings. And Trump, basically, if Trump was going to audit the Federal Reserve and get the interest rates back up, it was going to help them out, because they can actually go into put money into a savings account and actually get some money from it. Now you can't get any money from a savings account with it. And Trump has even talked negative interest rates, which means basically if you put money into a savings account, they're going to steal your money. And when we talked about that with it, it's like this is the policy of insanity. And there's no way to, and when he's talking about trying to stimulate the economy, he's talking about complete and utter craziness. Negative interest rates only hurt the economy because you're just stealing. And it is more ways to basically steal from the people. And that's all you're doing. And people think that, and there's a lot of people think, oh, they're going to vote for him. No, people are not. A lot of people are very angry with what he's done. Both what it called with domestic policy, with they feel with foreign policy he never came up with any of his things. Yes, he never added a war with it, but he hasn't stopped any of them. He's contributing to the famine in Yemen, and he has they have not cut off any ties with Israel and Saudi Arabia, who are actually causing all this famine. Uh, and when it comes down to domestic policy, he's just made things worse. I mean, you have cities burning right now because of all these draconian measures that are going from city to city, and people, especially with it. I mean, we have cops that are basically turning a blind eye to the Constitution and listening to mayors on what they should do. No, you follow the Constitution, that's it. Whatever the mayor says doesn't matter. And this is why when we look at the poll numbers, why they're not very good. And people try to say, oh, but the poll numbers in 2016, I've heard, but the poll numbers in 2016 weren't that good. The poll numbers are not going to be positive for the challenger. The challenger is always going to be on the low end of the spectrum. And in this case, it's going to be Biden. Why is Biden in the lead? If Biden's in the lead, that means something's horribly, horribly wrong for Trump. That means Trump did something horribly, horribly wrong. Now, first of all, Trump is a controversial figure because of all of his tweeting. And that's one thing that he does wrong, with all of his tweeting, all of his fights with all of his petty fights with the media. And this is one thing he does wrong. Another thing is when he does his, that's going to cause trouble. Another thing is when he does all of his fights with the, when he does the different fights with Democrats and basically arguing on stupid points, that's going to cause problems as well. Arguing at people that are basically pro-liberty, they're trying to save him from an issue with it, he'll yell at them. I mean, these are just the stupidest damn points. And this is what is causing him, this is what will cause him the election. I mean, you have them trying to, the pro-liberty people that are trying to kind of like bury him out, but it's probably not going to happen because he's pretty much gone full in on all these neocon policies. Now I'm probably going to leave it right here, and we'll see what we can do for another video, but that's about it. And I'll see you guys a little bit later. Bye, everyone.